Okay, and we are live, and this is episode 35, I think, of Mass of Nyarlathotep with our usual crew of bad boys and girls. And when we last left them, they were back at the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities to meet with Dr. Ali Kafour, who has promised to speak to them after hours regarding Black Pharaohs and other such things. So, I think you have much anticipated a meeting such as this, with Shelley even saying, if he's dead when we get back there, I quit. I don't blame
In character
you.
and out of character.
I don't blame you. All right. So we are on the 6th. And I have, just as a little side note, I have adopted a new recording mechanism for progress on books because it was starting to get a little too messy for me to keep track of stuff. So what the little dots on the calendar represent when you are next scheduled for an update based on your progress rate. So orange, if we look at players, is Shelley. Green is, oh, well, it used to be. You guys keep changing it. That was Thaddeus, and Natalia is blue. So when we hit those dates, I'll give you an update. It should be a little more efficient and keep me from forgetting that you're supposed to be making progress on these wonderful books. I also did do a little updating. So when you get a chance, you can look back over the books you are reading. There is additional information in there. And let's see. Oh, you did, in a couple cases, suffer a tiny bit of sanity loss. That's just what happens when you read these wonderful, wonderful tomes. All right. Any questions about that before we jump to the museum? I'll take that as a no. All right.
Good.
All right. So you return to the museum, and the after-hours guard is expecting you, and Ibu Musa bids you good luck. He really doesn't know what it is that you're doing, but he can see that you have serious looks on your faces and that you're eager to get back. So he can tell something is up, but he just wishes you luck, and he says, I'll be in the cafe across the street when you're ready to go back to the hotel or wherever it is you want to go. And the guard takes you back to an office, and Dr. Kafour is in the office, and he has arrayed 3 chairs for you and a chair for him to sit to discuss. And he says, I am glad to see that you decided to return, and rises and says, you are the one they mentioned would be joining us. I am Dr. Ali Kafour, to Thaddeus.
Yes. It's a pleasure to meet you. I am Thaddeus Pepin.
Welcome, Thaddeus. There is, of course, some tea here for you, if any of you would care for some. He said, we do not keep servants in the museum after hours. Budgets, you understand. You would have to pour your own tea.
That's fine. Thank you, Dr. Kafour.
Yes, it smells lovely, and I'm quite used to pouring for myself. Shelley will go and pour some and turn to Thaddeus. Would you care for some? And do you now?
Yes, please. Thank you, Shelley.
Yes, I would appreciate it.
And so she'll pour for everybody.
Mm-hmm. You can see he's rather keenly watching. You get the sense the way you're doing it.
Am I know in different countries there's different rituals associated with tea. Is there an Egyptian way to do this?
He says, there is, but it is of no great consequence. I am not a stickler for such things. I think that is the correct word.
Well,
I'm just curious. You're American. I was wondering if perhaps the English have a certain way of doing it. If you did it the same way. I see not entirely. He just smiles a bit. He says, you'll forgive my curiosity. I have a habit of steering things off course, if you will. He says, we have matters to discuss, I think.
Yes, that's quite understandable. My curiosity often gets the best of me as well. She'll return to her seat with the saucer and teacup.
He takes a sip of the tea as well. And he says, well, I'm quite frankly at a loss as to where to begin. I confess I am uninformed of exactly what you know and where your exact interests lie, and I would hate to waste your time with irrelevant information.
Well, we could start with Nephron Ka, then.
Yes.
What do you know on him?
I know more than most, but unfortunately this is very little. He is as far as my studies indicate that he was alive in the late 3rd dynasty. He survived 3 of the final pharaohs of that time and eventually vanquished each of them and became sole pharaoh of the land for a time. Some believe only a few years, some a matter of perhaps decades. I tend to lean more toward the lengthier duration, but I confess I do not have any overwhelming evidence to that effect. In any case, his reign was brought short by Sneferu, the great pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. It is unclear as to how he defeated his enemies. Some say through the power of the gods who joined with him to stand against the darkness that was the Black Pharaoh and Nephron Ka. Others believe it was through military conflict. And others believe, of course, that the Black Pharaoh is just a phantasm, fiction. But I do not ascribe to that notion.
And what do you think about the Black Pharaoh?
It is curious. You assume that the two are one and the same, I expect.
No.
No.
I do know, or at least assume, that the two are very separate.
Interesting.
I at least know, based on interactions that we've had with some of the those group members. The Black Pharaoh has many forms, many faces it takes on.
Yes.
But Nephron Ka and the Black Pharaoh are completely separate.
didn't understand that. Shelley turns to Natalia.
Oh, Natalia always usually has her notes with her. She's a fairly stacked manila folder, and she kind of brings it out of her bag.
Yeah.
I keep some detailed notes on things going on.
As she's doing that, Shelley, you can see Dr. Kafour sort of nodding approvingly at this big folder of notes. I assume it looks a little chaotic, perhaps.
Oh yes, very haphazard.
But he doesn't seem irritated by that at all. In fact, your impression, Shelley, is he's kind of impressed.
And Natalia kind of looks to Kafour. After going over many of the notes, the letters that we've found, and you know of the Carlisle expedition, yes?
Yes, of course. I was once friends with one of the principals of that expedition, Sir Aubrey Penhew.
I do have to ask, what is your opinion on their status in terms of being alive or not?
He looks at you with a kind of curious look and furrows his brow a little bit, and he says, "It is quite common knowledge that their entire expedition perished in Kenya."
Well, common knowledge is sometimes not very reliable, says Shelley.
I don't want to call it unreliable, but the things that we received from him are a bit haphazard, but deceased compatriot of ours believes they are still alive.
I myself have seen correspondence from Mr. Penhew that could only have happened after the expedition.
He stops for a minute and looks at you, and you can see he's taking this in and trying to make some sense of it. Are you suggesting that Sir Penhew is still living?
As well as Robert Carlyle and some of the other members of the expedition. No doubt the woman that dragged Carlyle along.
He looks off to the side for a minute and then looks back at you, Shelley, as you begin to speak.
I suspect that she's correct, but with my own eyes, I've seen letters to and from Mr. Penhew. One from Australia.
Australia?
Yes, he shipped some strange diagrams and I believe prototypes based on what looked like old designs to England, just some associates of his.
He kind of nods his head back and forth a little bit and says, he is an Englishman, as I'm sure you're aware. I'm sure he has many friends in England. You are sure that this correspondence dates after his pronouncement of his death?
Shelley's thinking back to the time she spent at the manufacturing plant and she saw the plans and letters.
Yes.
She starts going through her own notes and she saw a postmark, as a matter of fact. I personally didn't compare it to the date of the Carlisle expedition.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to roll an intelligence check to see if she can recall the...
Sure. Yeah, you're not exactly certain.
Let me see exactly what's in Shelley's written notes.
He lets you look through them for a moment.
We do know that someone mentioned Jack Brady still missing in Shanghai. And it was
Jack
addressed
Brady? I'm not familiar with this.
to Aubrey.
Who is Jack Brady?
Well, I can't recall exactly, but it was addressed to Aubrey. That was a letter that was just getting ready to go out from one of Aubrey's associates.
I see.
And
one of his associates, you think?
Yes. There were things received from Australia in Derbyshire. I can't be 100% positive that that was shipped after the expedition, but I don't see how he could have had it before the expedition.
Hmm. Well, that is an interesting proposition in any case.
Still, back to the Snefrin Ka.
Yes.
Historically, what area was he associated with? Any particular area of pyramids or ruins?
Nefrin Ka, you mean?
Yes.
Yes. Well, there is some speculation as to where he would have been buried. And my research indicates that he was most likely buried at Dashur. Pharaoh constructed 2 pyramids there.
Dashur?
Yes. It is further up towards the mouth of the Nile. Perhaps a day's journey.
I see. I'm going to draw a few things and let my companions ask you any questions that come to mind while I do so. And she's going to start to sketch out the upside down Ankh and the headdress and the scepters.
Mm-hmm.
And that freaking ugly, weird little statue that...
Yes. Okay.
She looks to Thaddeus. Do you have any questions, Thaddeus?
Not at this time. If he doesn't have Mr. Brady from Shanghai, that's something I was thinking about, but he was part of the expedition.
He was part of the Carlisle expedition. Ah, perhaps, yes. Mr. Carlisle had a quiet associate who never spoke. Perhaps this was this man. He was not even introduced.
Yes, that's could very well be a possibility.
Now, regarding the Black Pharaoh or Nyarlathotep, it was said in Carlisle's psychiatrist notes, Dr. Huston. It detailed that he was having dreams. He was seeing Black Pharaoh, seeing himself above basically the world, and a number of dreams, basically him being called to this place and beyond. to Africa.
To Africa. Ah,
That,
I did not know this.
that's why he came here. Besides the woman that was with him, that convinced him, encouraged him to come. I'm aware, I think her name was Black Woman that ventured with him. Did you happen to see her?
I
haven't.
never met the Carlisle expedition in person, I'm afraid, which surprised me greatly, I might add. No, there are photos of them in the newspapers, and of course, when a wealthy American comes to dig, it does create something of a splash, you understand. So there was, I remember reading about it in the Cairo papers, the bulletin particularly. I do not remember a black woman. Wait, there was a mention of one. I don't think I made much of it at the time. You think this is significant?
Yes, it was detailed in notes that were taken that she was the one who, I quote, fanned the flames of Robert's desire to come to Egypt. She pressed the issue, wanting to come here. I believe that she was at least assisting and helping bring him to that group that ended up apparently slaughtering them, the bloody tongues up in Kenya.
The Bloody Tongue, I've heard of this cult.
I have a feeling it's connected to the greater scheme of everything.
That is strange. It is a decidedly African cult, with very little to do with Egypt.
True, but I think it has to do with the Black Pharaoh. The dreams that Carlisle was detailing. Black Pharaoh, I think, had this long tongue jutting out of its head. I associate that at least. Might be loose, but I associate that with the name.
It is possible. The Black Pharaoh has many names. This could be one aspect of that worship.
What do you know of his influence? Or at least what his followers are doing, or trying to accomplish?
As to their larger aims, I can only say, like many cults, their desires to bring back the worship of their god to the forefront. As worshippers of the Black Pharaoh have always done. There is a resentment against modern ways. Ironically, in the Third Dynasty, it was against the gods of Egypt, the newer gods. The followers of the Black Pharaoh believed that the old gods were being neglected and replaced with false man-made gods and not the true ones. So they desired to honor the ones they believed in, and that involved all manner of aggressive activities, you might say. Later it was under Queen Nyarlathotep that the worship of the Black Pharaoh was restored to Egypt for a brief time until her dark ways were put aside.
What was that?
Hmm?
The name that you just... I have not heard that yet.
Queen Nyarlathotep. You do not know of her.
No.
Very interesting.
Is there any other names that people refer to her as?
Not that I have heard. But you are aware of the recent theft at Giza, I assume?
Are
I
we?
don't think so.
No? No, I don't think so.
What theft?
The Clive expedition was digging recently to further excavate one of the great pyramids, and they believed that they found a secret burial chamber heretofore undiscovered, with a massive sarcophagus, which there was speculation, not only from the authorities but from the Clive expedition itself, that this was Queen Nitocris herself's burial place, something which no one has ever found until now, perhaps. But the sarcophagus was, well, it vanished. This was
Vanished?
only a couple of months ago. 2.5 perhaps.
Yeah.
Who is in charge of this Clive expedition? Are any of them still around?
Oh, yes, indeed. Dr. Clive. I believe Henry Clive is his name. An Englishman associated with the Penhew Foundation, no less.
Shelley makes a face.
He says there was quite a scandal, you can imagine. Losing by some accounts, a 12-ton sarcophagus right out from under the nose of an expedition. Rather miraculously, it caused some concern. The details of this are not widely known, I might add. The authorities are not in any great hurry to broadcast such a failure. The Clive expedition has moved on.
Shelley holds out her journal and points to the drawings, the sketches she's completed. Do any of these mean anything to you?
Remind me one at a time, each one.
Inverted Ankh.
Ah.
Of eyes, two separate.
Yes, the invert. Okay.
Statue of Nyarlathotep.
Yep, he looks at the inverted Ankh and he nods. He says, "This is a symbol of the Brotherhood of the Black Pharaoh." The inverted Ankh, the upside down life. Darkness from light, light from darkness.
That makes sense. In a way, I suppose. What about these others?
Oh, hold on a second. I'm getting a call. Let's take a quick little break. Sorry. Sorry. Going to continue. Okay, I am back. Sorry for that brief interruption. So yes, he looks at he holds the Ankh in his hand, and he hands it back to you with some visible distaste.
Yes, it's an odd metal, and I don't like it either.
It
what
is
about
not
these-
a symbol that any clean man would wish to touch.
Is it a symbol that many would recognize?
No. The Ankh, yes, but the significance of an inverted Ankh, no. I'm sure scholars would speculate. One can assume a sign turned upside down as a common rejection of its usual meaning. But I doubt many would associate it with the Brotherhood itself. Most do not even know that it exists, ever existed, in fact.
She nods, turns the page, points to the headdress. Have you ever seen anything like this mentioned?
That is interesting. May I? He reaches out to take it.
Yes, go ahead.
He turns it over and over in his hands, and he says, "This is certainly Egyptian in origin, but I have never seen it before. It is most unusual. It is obviously of a ceremonial nature." And he said, and there are indications that it would be worn by a priest to channel the power of his god.
That would make sense. But I wonder of the significance of the eyes.
Eyes are a very common icon in Egyptian hieroglyphs. It may indicate a sort of spiritual sight, visions, seeing truth or seeing the face of the god.
She nods and turns the page again. Have you ever seen scepters like these?
How big is this?
She'll indicate with her two hands.
They are reminiscent of the scepters a pharaoh would hold to show his authority. Not uncommon.
And with a little bit of hesitation, she turns the page to the last picture, the best she could do to represent the disturbing statue that she saw.
This must be the bloody tongue of which you speak.
Is it? Because strangely, it was in the possession of one of the cult of the Black Pharaoh.
That would suggest then that the bloody tongue is another aspect of the Black Pharaoh, the Nyarlathotep.
She closes the book and says, You know that these people are out there, but you mentioned that it is said that this cult, this Nefren Ka, was originally brought down by Snaferu, and
Indeed.
it makes me wonder if there is this group still out there, this group of cultists that worship the Black Pharaoh and Nefren Ka. Are there those that oppose them still?
He looks down. He says, "It is possible. Good men, God-fearing men, will always strive against darkness such as this."
Shelley, her hands start to tremble a little bit, and she's struggling to kind of keep herself from tearing up, and she says, I think people do try, but at times it can seem a bit hopeless and overwhelming.
Yes.
If there were anyone besides yourself who you even suspected might know more, might be a believer, but not one of them.
I see. There is a strange congregation of brothers who worship at the Mosque of Ibn Tulun. It may be that they have some knowledge of these matters, though I have not discussed it with them. I have only heard of their curious interest in ancient wickednesses, one might say, evils. Perhaps they know more.
Shelley just looks from left to right at Thaddeus and Natalia. A little bit of hope in her eyes. And shrugs.
Doctor, we appreciate everything you've told us so far. So we do have, unfortunately, we've angered the brother at this point. We know we can't stop at least looking into it and trying to do something about it.
Yes.
We're still figuring out the best way to go about it. It seems sometimes there's just no stopping them. But as we're attempting to follow Robert Carlyle's footsteps to try and learn more, is there any of them who are active here in Giza that you know of?
Members of this expedition?
No.
No.
The Brotherhood.
Oh. Ha. I must confess, and you will perhaps think me a foolish man for saying this, but I find my interests have always tended toward what has already happened. History. Lives of those who are past. I find myself paying very little attention to modern events, perhaps to my detriment.
Yeah, perhaps it's not to your detriment. Pursuing the modern events hasn't brought us a lot of happiness, I suppose.
Well, I recognize in myself a desire to seek the safety of that which has already happened and is unchanging. There is no danger in that which is past. It is only the present that causes us suffering and loss.
Perhaps. With that in mind, I would ask for your own sake, as well as for ours, that you wouldn't mention this conversation to anyone if you can avoid it, particularly anyone with the Penhu Foundation.
He said, my ties to the Penhu Foundation were severed during the Carlisle expedition. I have not spoken to them since and have no intention of doing so again.
Still, there are others. I know. Have you heard of the name Al-Shakti?
I have heard the name. He is, it is a wealthy family in cotton.
I don't know where that is.
Oh, no. They have many cotton plantations.
Oh. I see. Well,
I am not the best man to provide social introductions or provide juicy, how do you say, gossip. He says, if you want information on influential people, I strongly suggest you speak to Mr. Wasif at the Cairo Bulletin. He is quite knowledgeable and probably most happy to speak to you. I've conferred with him several times concerning expeditions and found him to be quite charming and interesting and knowledgeable.
It sounds like he's someone that we need to speak to as soon as possible. If you have
For matters of the present, yes, I recommend him.
Thank you.
I will confine my remarks to the past.
Of course. Do you know anything else on the Black Pharaoh in regards to maybe his influence on dreams or anything of the like?
Oh, yes. It was said during the reign of Nephren Ka that he could send out with a word a dark cloud, breathe this cloud into the air, and it would go out from him over the land, bringing terror and horrific nightmares, even death, to those he wished to bring this to. He was greatly feared. A most accomplished magician.
So, do you believe in magics then?
I do.
We have seen some, of course. Experienced others. I know your knowledge focuses on the past, but do you have any knowledge on such magics?
Personally? No, my knowledge is academic when it comes to such things. Most of what I know is from a very terrible book I read once.
A book, Shelley says, looking up.
Well,
Fidgeting.
more precisely a set of scrolls, but yes. A terrible, terrible chronicle. He says there were many incantations and other suggestions of powers from the gods that one might attain. I feel silly saying this. I once attempted to invoke one, and it was not a pleasant experience. He kind of pours himself another cup of tea.
Do you still have these scrolls?
He stops pouring and looks very intently at you, Shelley.
She isn't very good at, well, she seems nervous and hopeful and dreadful at the same time. Probably a combination of all those things. Just knowing that this is something they should probably study, but at the same time, the feeling of growing closer to that creepy, nebulous presence that she feels gives her pause. I know that the people we are opposing both believe and practice these things, and I don't like to think of it as magic. I think it's channeling forces in a way that science certainly can't currently explain, but knowing what they're capable of exactly and how to counter it. And she shakes her head. That would be a priceless boon to us.
He says, I'm afraid that these scrolls of which I spoke are no longer available. And in any case, they would not give you the knowledge you sought. You must understand that the writer of such things has no intent of countering anything in it. It is a prescription for all manner of seeking dark knowledge for its own sake, or for the sake of exercising power over one's fellow man. I do not see how you could use this without yourself being corrupted. A man must be careful what he touches and what he eats.
Yes, but if we seek to strike a man without knowing what armor he wears, how can we know where he's vulnerable?
You can see he's getting a little uncomfortable at this point.
Jelly, she'll put an arm on Jelly's shoulder. In regards to that line of questioning, I don't think we should pursue.
Shelley looks at Natalia and opens her mouth as if she's going to argue more, but she sits back and nods, takes a deep breath. Forgive me. My experience with these people has left me a bit desperate, flailing about for something, I suppose.
He looks at you again, kind of eye to eye, and says, "You must be very careful where that restlessness might take you."
And she gives him just a kind of a weak smile. Yes. Of course. No danger of me becoming like them, that's for certain. I think a man has to be born with a certain potential to become like them.
He smiles a little ruefully and says, "You are still a very young woman. It is my experience that no man is born evil, and no man understands himself or his actions to be evil. All men justify what they believe and what they do. To every man, he is his own hero. He is always doing right in his own eyes. It is only through the eyes of a brother that one may see when darkness has entered one's soul."
She holds eye contact for another second or two and then looks down at her hands and her skirt again and fidgets and just kind of nods. I'm sure that's true.
He takes a pretty heavy breath and then remembers he was in mid pouring of tea. He's been holding the teapot this whole time, and rather absently, and he goes back to finishing his pour and then puts it down and takes a sip.
Dr. Kafour, if you have anything else you can tell us, anything else you could think of, so at least with the knowledge moving on.
I would first ask you a question.
Of course.
What do you intend to do with the information I am giving you? There is more I can tell you, but I am curious to what end. You are not like me, I can see that. You will not take this knowledge and simply go home and tuck it away, add it to your growing body of information. No, you will do something with it. I can sense this.
We want to stem the tide of what they're doing. We've seen the atrocities that they commit to the people they've killed, tried to drive mad, and we've lost many people along the way. At this point, we can't just sit back and forget about it or just wait for them to come for us. We have to at least spend the time that we have left, if it is numbered to be short, spend it attempting to at least slow down what they're doing, maybe save a few people. Just do something, because if we do nothing, it's... She stops and she looks to Shelley.
Yes, I don't know what we can do, but perhaps even if we can just expose them and make it harder for them, if we can only slow them down and be obstacles that that may be the best we can accomplish, but if enough light is shined on what they're doing, and they can no longer operate in the darkness. She shrugs. Well, maybe that's what we would call victory.
He takes a deep breath and he stands up and turns and walks to the window of his office, and with his hands clasped behind him, he just looks outside. Obviously, he's in thought. And a couple minutes pass, unless you say something.
Natalia just sits in her chair. She occasionally taps against the side of her teacup, idly, just waiting for him to say something, almost on the edge of her seat, not wanting to disturb this. She looks to Thaddeus and Shelley to gauge their feelings.
Shelley is something about the conversation has made her increasingly uncomfortable and nervous, causing her to reflect on experiences she's been trying hard to avoid by, focusing on the tasks at hand or work or goals. She's been just folding creases in her skirt and then smoothing them out over and over to the point where her hands are kind of wet with sweat, and she's starting to leave a damp spot on her skirt from constantly fidgeting with it. And she doesn't really look up. She occasionally will glance through her eyelashes to see if Kafour is still thinking, but otherwise she just sits quietly fidgeting.
And Thaddeus would be sitting staring at his teacup, kind of whatever's left in it, swirling around. And after a brief moment, he would actually speak up and say something. He would just kind of look up and, well, Doctor, with what you just asked in regards, and after thinking, what would you do if you stumbled upon something and now every time you turn, someone is trying to kill you, or worse, look at Natalia, trying to corrupt people?
He turns and looks at you, Thaddeus, almost kind of seriously for the first time. And again, a kind of a sad little expression comes over his face, and he says, I do not believe the question of what I would do is of any relevance. The question is what you would do. You are more people of action than I. He nods. Very well. I will assist you in what manner I can, such as I am able.
Thank you, Doctor.
I do not know if this is wise to tell you or not. But since I do not know, I will tell you what I know. I believe, from what I have researched, that Nephron Ka was buried in the Bent Pyramid at Dashur. That Sneferu buried him there purposefully to shield the world from him rather than to shield him from the world.
Do you think that the Brotherhood is attempting to find Nefrenka? Maybe to... I don't know exactly, but I have suspicions. At least when you said the queen, Nitocris, she's missing. If they have magics inside, I know they at least have magics to take the life force from one and give it to another. I don't want to sound crazy, but what if they're attempting to, I don't know, restore life to these pharaohs to aid in their worship?
Huh. It is possible. She was a great proponent of the Black Pharaoh. So evil was she was buried alive wherever she was buried, if it was indeed at Giza. It would not surprise me if one aim of this the Brotherhood would be to bring her back. Such things are not impossible if what I have read is truthful. There is one more thing that ties this together in my mind. The Carlisle expedition went to Dashur. And spent some time excavating in the Bent Pyramid.
Do you think they were either attempting to find him? I'm guessing it would be might be much bigger if they actually found Nefrenka. They may have gotten
Possibly.
clues somewhere else. Maybe.
I do not know what they found. Theirs was a most curious endeavor. They arrived in July of 1919 and departed just 2 months later. 2 months in Egypt, that is all. A very curious excavation, is it not? They visited Giza first, though there is no indication they spent any great amount of time there, perhaps just a visit. Then they went on to Saqqara, where they dug for less than a month looking for Third Dynasty artifacts. That is when I tried to go and see Sir Penhew, or Sir Aubrey, but he would not see me. It was most curious indeed. And then, for no apparent reason, they packed up their expedition and moved to Dashur again for less than a month before deciding to leave. Sir Aubrey told the papers that they had to evacuate owing to the seasonal floods from the Nile, which would ruin their dig site, but this is factually incorrect.
I wonder if they found what they were looking for.
Maybe.
How long ago was this that they supposedly left?
They left in July of 1919. Oh, I'm sorry. They arrived in May and left in July of 1919. This was 6 years ago, almost.
But this Clive expedition found Nitocris's sarcophagus 2 months ago?
Yes. In a remarkably short amount of time, I might add.
And where was she discovered? Which pyramid?
She was discovered at the pyramid of Mycerinus. It is the smallest of the three. He says, you can actually see them from my window. And he goes back to his window and kind of points out across the plains. You can see the tops of two of the pyramids, though the third one is too far below the horizon. There is some irregular terrain between here and there.
Is that Giza he's pointing to?
Yes, yes. He points west.
I wonder if they took her to Dashur.
He says the sarcophagus weighed, as I said, several tons. A minimum of 6, and some estimated 10 or even 12 tons. This was a mammoth effort to take this out, up the shafts and outside with only 30 minutes from the time it was left alone.
You said the entire sarcophagus is gone.
Indeed. It is a mystery that is giving the authorities much consternation. And, of course, giving rise to all sorts of fantastical theories.
Of course. It seems nearly impossible.
The estimation, and I was called in by the authorities to examine it, so I saw with my own eyes. To move it up and out by the shortest route would have taken an effort of dozens of men over a week, 2, perhaps even 3 weeks' time of hard labor and impressive engineering. Yet there are no signs of any movement of any kind. No ruts on the floor, no signs of rollers being used anywhere. It just simply vanished. And it had been watched by 2 Egyptian authorities, 2 soldiers, who also disappeared.
And I'm not too sure exactly, as my studies of pyramids is quite lacking. Are they sure maybe there was some sort of, I don't know, trapped floor beneath?
A secret entrance. Yes, there was much speculation, of course. Strange as that sounds, that was the most rational explanation possible. But I and the authorities made an exhaustive search of the chamber and the shaft outside the chamber and found no evidence of any such thing.
Strange indeed. But I'm sure it is within most likely realm of possibility for maybe a member of the Brotherhood to get it out somehow. I don't know. I'm not fully, don't fully understand the capabilities of what they can accomplish. That may be.
He nods. He says, of course it occurred to me that some manner of sorcery was used. Of course I did not mention this to the authorities. They are a superstitious lot, of course, but such a theory, even to them, would be nonsense, at least to the officers. And it certainly would not fly as an excuse to the academic community, as you can well imagine.
Of course. You said that Dr. Clive, his group moved on. Where did they move on to?
Unless they have moved yet again, the last I understood, they are in Memphis. Excavating some random minor burial sites of no great significance as far as I can tell.
All right. Well, and Natalia's been writing down pretty much everything that's been talked about. And she looks up and puts down her pen for a moment. It might be something to look into just in case.
He says, I spoke briefly with Dr. Clive. I make it a practice to try to get in touch with and how English say rub shoulders with any archaeologists who come here. It is beneficial usually to everyone. I found Dr. Clive to be friendly enough, but somewhat secretive, as I will say, has marked all of the Penhew Foundation's excavations over the years. They are always marked with mystery and in many cases unexplained deaths.
And now a missing sarcophagus.
Indeed. Shocking, yes, but when viewed in light of all of the other strangenesses that have been brought with the Foundation, perhaps not as strange after all.
So this Mr. Clive, would he strike you as a fellow that would have something to do with the missing sarcophagus, maybe?
I'm sure he would not appreciate you calling him Mr. Clive. Doctors are very sensitive about this subject. If you meet him, I recommend that you address him by his title. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Do you think he could have anything to do with the missing sarcophagus? It seems kind of odd that they would just disappear.
He is the one who discovered it. he went through the proper procedures, notified the authorities upon its discovery. It is certainly possible, but I don't know the man well, I must say.
Yes, well, I just think it was that something so heavy and large would be able to disappear without some type of help.
Yes. I'm afraid you would have to ask him any questions.
Yeah, well, that's when you're right. Although I doubt he'll come forward if I ask him if he stole it or not.
No, I would not expect so. He was, of course, interviewed by the authorities and denied any knowledge of the theft or how it might have been carried out. He expressed as much confoundment as the rest of us.
If he is involved, then we could locate him. I'm sure that eventually he would lead us to it if he didn't know that he was being observed.
He smiles a little bit and says, a little bit of sleuthing, I hear.
It is common at this point.
I see. You are certainly no academics. I admire that. I meant that as a compliment.
Of course. As much as I'd rather be sitting in an office right now, it is nice to travel. Looking on the bright side. She'll look over to Thaddeus.
Yes, it's been nothing but bright sides.
And better than being dark and gloomy and drowning self in drink. Bah.
Yes, well, so far it's pretty competitive with that. Dark and gloomy in hospitals and drinks and tend to be the same feeling.
Talia huffs a little bit at that and looks back to the doctor.
Oh, he seems lost in thought. I was just recalling. There is a prophecy I forgot to mention.
What prophecy?
Concerning the Black Pharaoh. It is said by some that he will rise fingers and toes after the great good ones. I'm not exactly sure what this means. Fingers and toes after the great good one. But it is said that a new age will begin, the end of the domination of mankind on earth and the beginning of freedom and truth for the followers of the Black Pharaoh.
Fingers and toes, you say?
Yes. Does this mean anything to you?
I don't know what to think of fingers and toes.
I'm not sure. There might be something. Something in the notes about that. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
He said, well, it struck me as curious and one of many ancient prophecies that I have read in my studies. They become tiresome, honestly.
Of course. It can be repetitive when it's always predicting the same doom every
Indeed.
time.
Indeed. It is a tiresome pattern. But this one mentioned the Black Pharaoh specifically, so I should mention it.
I will keep it in mind. Just in case it happens to mean something in the future.
If a thought does occur to you, please share it with me. I want you to understand I am curious about anything you might discover, any knowledge you might add to my own. I know he looks a little sheepish. He says, you understand it is only for my own edification, but still, it is a matter of some curiosity to me. And you have certainly piqued my interest again in this subject. I recall the many interesting conversations I had about the Black Pharaoh with Sir Aubrey. It's been quite some time since I've even given it much thought.
If anything else comes to your mind, we're staying at the Shepherd Hotel.
Ah, of course, yes. Yes, I will do so. Of course, you can come and visit me whenever it seems appropriate, or you have need of my assistance, or just information.
We'll make sure to keep you informed as well, Doctor. You've helped us quite a bit, and it's the least we could do.
Thank you. He says, I like to think of myself as a God-fearing man, but he looks around as if there's somebody who might be listening, though that's kind of silly. And he says, though between you and me, I am not exactly a good Muslim. I am afraid. He says, but nevertheless, I would pray for you. I will ask Allah to set your feet on the path of light and truth, to guide you to victory in whatever struggles you may have ahead.
May He protect us on our way as well.
And with that, he stands up and says, I suppose I should show you out.
Yes, we've taken up quite a bit of your time. Thank you so much.
It is no problem at all.
It's very much appreciated.
He says, I've done little but talk. Talk is cheap. It is actions that are costly. And he just goes to the door of his office, and you can see he's kind of eager just to end the whole thing at the moment.
Even Shelley, recognizing that, will stand up, pick up her teacup and place them down along with everyone else's carefully on the table, and thank him again.
He just nods.
I do believe we will be seeing each other again.
I do hope so.
There, just give him a nod and start making his way into the closed museum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we all leave
Okay. Yeah, he takes you to the exit and where the guard is, and just exchanges a couple words with the guard. And it's not complicated Arabic, Shelley, so you at least get the gist of what he's saying. He just it says something about you leaving now, and the guard opens the door for you. And Dr. Kafour just kind of touches his chest and bows to the three of you, and touches his forehead in a kind of a parting gesture, and then turns, and without waiting for any kind of response, he just kind of turns and plods back down the stone passage in his stockings. He just has socks on, which is pretty common inside. And the guard just kind of lets you out and closes the doors behind you.
As we leave, Shelley stops for a moment and looks to both Thaddeus and Matt. I've been thinking. I like our guard. Our guide, Ibi Musa. But obviously he's a man motivated by money. And I suspect that if someone were to pay him to know what we've been about, what we've been discussing, he would share it. I think perhaps we should be very guarded or selective in what we say. As we meet up with him now, maybe seem disappointed, as if what we were hoping for didn't quite pan out. We didn't learn much. What do you think?
Well, there's no reason just to put this by as a private tour of him.
Maybe. I had to agree, Shelley. Being more guarded with what we say could be for the best. If someone were to pay him to find out what we were talking about, it seems like we can't find anything. Only problem is when we go to these places, it will be, a little bit suspicious, is the only thing.
Yeah.
Right. Well, at least we can perhaps avoid them knowing very far ahead of time that we are going.
Well, it's again we're operating under the guise that they don't know what we're doing, and I think full well they do know what we're doing.
I'm sure they do. But still, I'd rather they didn't know exactly where we're going to be and exactly what time.
Well, I don't think we usually share our agenda with them, so no reason to start now.
Yeah, just a thought.
No, it's a good thought, Shelley. Well, shall we meet him again?
Yes. I'm sure it's getting kind of late. You'd want to take us back to the hotel, where we can eat, drink, and die in our sleep, I'm sure. Kind of so smart.
Yes, I do always wish for the sweet embrace of death whenever I go to bed. A kid!
Oh, good.
This is why I drink, so...
See, it's funny because it could happen.
Shelley looks at Thaddeus with kind of a smile that's half grimace. Maybe I just don't drink enough to get the joke.
That is, I mean, if you'd like to die in your sleep after drinking too much, just wait for the other two of us to be dead as well. It would be appreciated.
Well, I don't think it would be the drink that get me. I think it'd be the people with the knife.
I'll do what I can to protect you from knives, but can't say the same about stairs.
Stairs are quite dangerous.
They are. She'll pat him on the shoulder as they approach where their guide is.
Mm-hmm. He's in the cafe. Again, drinking with a different group of, quote, friends, maybe?
Do you see him?
And she looks around and looks. That is one with blue turban. Some traditional look. She points him out, kind of in the crowd.
There are my VIPs.
Is Amy Musa just having coffee there, Darren?
He is.
I believe Darren might be muted.
I think so too.
Oh, I didn't mean to be muted. Yes, he's there. Sorry, I was talking, not much. But yes, he's in there. He's talking to another group of possible friends, different people this time. He looks very jovial and animated, and he sees you kind of standing right outside the kind of the overhang there, and he my VIPs are back. And he stands up and says something in Arabic and tosses down some piastres onto the table in sort of this big man gesture, obviously paying for all of their little snacks and drinks, and comes to the door, and he seems in a very bright mood. And he says, "So, he says, I trust you had a good time looking at all of the, having a private tour or whatever it was."
It cost a little bit of money. She'll look over to Thaddeus with a bit of a smile. But
Evie just kind of waves his hand dismissively in Thaddeus's direction. He says, "I'm sure it was nothing for a rich man like you."
I'm only rich as long as I don't spend all my money.
Ha! He says, "Yes, I suppose that is always true, but..." He says, "I can see you are a man with very, very deep pockets indeed."
And that is why we enjoy your company, Mr. Musa, because you know the value of deep pockets.
Of course. You're a gentleman of great character, and I am honored to serve you. And he bows very formally and does a whole hand kind of windmill motion as he's bowing and flourishes.
Yes, Thaddeus is a character.
Yes. A miserable, almost crippled character.
Thaddeus.
Dripping in sweat, as you can tell.
He says, "I have known very few miserable rich men in my life. Most rich men can buy their happiness."
If only that was true.
We do not keep Thaddeus happy enough to chalet.
She rolls her eyes a little bit. To be honest, we don't try very hard.
Eby says, he looks at the two girls and says, "This is He says, this is a challenge for EB to make the unhappy rich man happy. This EB can do.
Well, what do you suggest, DB? What do you think would make our unhappy, sweaty, rich compatriot happy?
He says, I can take you to all of the secret places of Cairo. Opium dens, women, even drinks of your kind of drink. He says, we can go on camels if that will help you. Sometimes the fresh air. There are many things we could do.
As enlightening as it sounds, it's
Dancers. Or I can hire no small number of boys off the street who will fan you all day long or rub your feet for you.
I don't think we need to go that far.
Pour rose water on you.
Oh, yes, that. I think he'd love that.
It has a distinct improvement of the disposition, I have noticed. A man feels as good as he smells, yes?
Oh, poor Thaddeus.
But I'm sure the hotel will have plenty of buckets of water to bring to my bath.
Evie can arrange for this rose water. You would like?
But the hotel wouldn't have the rose water. You'd have to give it.
Why give more business to that hotel? You would be employing poor children. Think of how good that will make you feel. Charitable acts also help the soul of a rich man.
The children, that is.
Think of the children.
There shall be no children pouring me a bed.
You would deny these poor beggar boys? Oh, perhaps this is the root of your unhappiness.
Stop denying these small boys.
Shelly is like downright just like chortling and trying to cover her mouth.
I'm pretty sure what would make me happy right now is to go back to the hotel, so I can order my bath to not be delivered by little boys.
Evie kind of stiffens a little bit and takes a disappointed snort and says, as it pleases the rich man, I will take you back to the hotel.
Mr. Musa, I have every confidence that you are the best person in the city to supply us with everything that Thaddeus whims may desire. I think maybe he just won't know ahead of time. We'll let you know tomorrow. Your knowledge of secret places, I'm sure, will come in handy.
His expression softens a little bit. He sounds a little mollified by that, and he strokes his beard as if he's thinking for a moment, and he says, yes, I do agree with you. Ibi Musa is the best man in the city for curing a rich man's ails. Yes, I could not have said it better myself.
And though Thaddeus is not interested, I will say I am interested in such opium dens.
I didn't
Natalia?
deny my interest in the
What?
opium dens. Just the boy.
She looks back and forth. Are you serious?
And the last time you were in an opium den,
Oh, yes, we had no problems whatsoever.
But to be real, technically, it was outside the opium den we had.
Oh, completely unrelated. Oh, she throws her hands up in the air.
Natalia smiles a bit and looks to. Yes, I remember directly after, fairly well.
It's a little hazy for me, but I'm sure it was a good time.
I remember the alley.
Something about some stairs keeps into my memory.
No, it was before the stairs, that is.
Oh, he smiles. Yes. I do remember now.
Ah, you see, even the thought of it brings smiles to Mr. Thaddeus. So, should I arrange for this tonight?
Maybe not tonight. Thaddeus, he's still getting used to walking far distances. I think this evening we will go back to hotel, have a long drink. He will have long baths poured by lovely women.
Not these lovely women.
Look at these lovely women.
The loveliest woman.
Yes,
All right. Well, you've sort of been waiting near a streetcar does come by, and he ushers you all on board that, and you take that back to the hotel. And this, by the way, is this is the interior dining room of the actual Shepherd's Hotel from the period. If you would like to have dinner there. Before he drops you off, he does ask if you would like him to plan your activities for tomorrow, and if so, what your desires might be.
That is when again. But we're a little unsure about that yet. Rest assured, you show up around the same time, and we'll be able to decide that.
He says, very well. He says, and he promises, he said, I have asked some of my friends, I have not forgotten about your interest in the Red Alley. He says, I have been asking about, and I have been told that there is an older dragoman who has heard this name referred to before. I will speak to him tomorrow morning.
thank you very much, Mr. Musa.
He nods and just kind of politely waits with his hands sort of half out, but not in an obvious gesture.
And Thaddeus, of course, would give him a generous amount of money.
You get to see all his teeth for that.
Now make sure you share it with those poor boys that you were referring to.
Oh yes, of course. But I cannot afford a rose bath. That is for rich men. I am not a rich man.
Well, who says you need to have the rose bath? Sometimes you just have to make a kid smile.
I make them smile with my wit and charm. And I throw them the occasional piastra, of course. I do my duty to Allah.
Well, I'm sure they're thankful for it.
He says, you smile more tonight, Mr. Thaddeus. And you lovely ladies, have a good evening as well. And I hope that you will have many smiles also. And he bows as usual and retreats into the crowd.
And as they head inside, Natalia looks to Thaddeus, looks to Shelley. I think tonight we should have a relaxing night. It's been a while since we've, I think, really enjoyed each other's company.
Yes, maybe a leisurely dinner.
Let's maybe pretend for one night that our world as we see it is not crashing inwards. Yes.
I shall envision many young boys bringing Thaddeus rosewater for us.
Ah, yes.
Yes. Well, speaking of the rose water, I better order my bath now. It might take him a while to fill.
Yes, very wise. They'll time it to be ready for you right after dinner.
But I believe that is a wonderful idea.
Good. I'll make sure to get us a seat for dinner, and we can talk about good times.
Yay.
Yay.
It's a wonderful idea.
So you will pass a pleasant evening pretending that you are normal tourists in romantic Cairo on holiday with fine food and good company.
Yes.
And we'll call scene there. And that will end our session.